is a particular kind of guilt that greens powders sell very well. It usually starts with a normal day. You were busy, you ate something quick, maybe lunch came from a wrapper, maybe dinner was late, maybe you opened the refrigerator and saw the bag of spinach you bought with good intentions slowly giving up on life in the back drawer. And then the ad shows up. One scoop in one glass, and suddenly it sounds like the whole problem has been handled. Daily greens, energy, gut health, immunity, detox, 75 ingredients, superfoods from places you have never been. It does not just look healthy, it looks like forgiveness. Like maybe you can miss the vegetables, skip the chopping, forget the salad, and still feel like you did something good for yourself. That is the quiet emotional power of greens powders. They are not only selling powdered plants, they are selling relief from the feeling that basic food has become one more thing modern life expects you to keep up with. I'm Sophia River, and this is Old World Remedies, where we look at the forgotten household ways that still make sense today. And today, we are talking about what people used before greens powders took over. Not because every greens powder is useless. Some may help fill a gap. Some people like them. Some are probably better made than others. But the question is not only, does this scoop contain nutrients? The better question is, what did the scoop quietly replace? Because a few generations ago, most households were not trying to solve vegetables with a morning powder. Vegetables were more likely to show up in ordinary places: a pot of soup, a pan of cabbage, cooked greens on the stove, or whatever peas, beans, onions, carrots, potatoes and herbs could be stretched into another meal. Those kitchens were not perfect. No kitchen ever was. But vegetables were usually not treated like a separate achievement that had to be outsourced to a subscription pouch. They were folded into the normal work of feeding people. That may be the part worth bringing back. Let's be fair from the beginning. Greens powders became popular for a reason. A lot of people really are not eating enough fruits and vegetables. Public health data has been pointing in that direction for years. So when someone buys a greens powder, I understand the impulse. It feels quick and practical, almost like insurance. You do not have to wash anything, cook anything, or plan a meal. You just scoop, shake, drink, and move on with your day. And in a life that often makes real food feel inconvenient, that is very tempting. But there is a difference between adding something to your diet and replacing the thing your diet is missing. A greens powder may add vitamins, minerals, or plant compounds to your day. That can be useful. But it is not the same thing as eating vegetables. Most greens powders cannot give you the full texture, water, volume, chewing, fibre, and meal context of actual plants. Many contain only a small amount of fibre, compared with what you would get from beans, vegetables, fruit, oats or whole grains across a normal day. That matters because vegetables are not just vitamin delivery systems hiding under leaves. They are food. They take up space in the stomach. They slow a meal down. They bring water. They bring fibre. They sit beside protein, starch, fat, broth, salt, and all the other things that make a plate feel like a meal. A scoop can be useful, but it cannot fully imitate that. And yet the label often speaks as if it can. The promise is clever because it takes a real problem, people are not eating enough vegetables, and offers the fastest possible emotional solution. Instead of a cutting board, a soup pot, or a repeatable food habit, it offers a scoop. That is where I think we have to slow down. The quiet risk is that the powder can slowly make vegetables feel optional. You start with it as a backup, then it becomes a routine, Then the routine starts feeling like the thing itself, and after a while, the vegetables the powder was supposed to help you eat are no longer showing up on the table. That is the shift I care about. Not whether one brand is better than another, not whether a scoop is morally wrong, but whether a product that was supposed to fill a gap ends up making the gap easier to ignore. There is another piece here too. In the United States, greens powders are dietary supplements. Some may be carefully tested and clearly labelled. Others may lean much more heavily on beautiful language than meaningful evidence. And even a natural-looking green powder is still a manufactured product. The ingredients have been grown, dried, processed, blended, packaged, shipped and stored. That does not mean you should be afraid of every powder. It just means you should not be hypnotised by the colour green. A scoop can look clean and still deserve the same questions you would ask any supplement. What is in it? How much is actually there? Who tested it? What claim is it making? And what part of real food is it quietly asking you to forget? Now let's set the pouch down for a moment and go back to a kitchen that did not have 75 superfoods in a tub. Imagine a pot on the stove. Maybe there are onions softening at the bottom. Maybe carrots, celery, cabbage, beans, potatoes, or whatever was left from yesterday. Maybe there are greens that are not beautiful anymore, but still good enough to cook. Add some broth, some salt, and enough time for the vegetables to stop feeling like separate ingredients and start becoming dinner. This was one of the old answers. Soup. Soup is not glamorous. It does not photograph like a bright green powder spilling across a marble countertop. But soup solved a problem that modern food culture often makes harder than it needs to be. It took vegetables that might not be exciting on their own and made them easy to eat. A carrot became part of dinner. Cabbage softened into the pot. Greens disappeared into broth. Beans made the whole thing more filling. A few herbs made it taste alive. Nobody had to announce, "I am now consuming my micronutrients." It was just soup. That is where older kitchens had an advantage. They did not always try to make vegetables impressive. They tried to make them usable. The questions were practical. Could this go in the pot? Could it stretch the meal? Could we use what is left? Could we make it taste good enough that people would eat it again tomorrow? That kind of thinking does not sell as easily as a 30-serving pouch, but it builds habits. The next old answer was cooked greens. Before greens became a powder, they were often exactly what the name says: greens. Collards, mustard greens, turnip greens, spinach, chard, cabbage, whatever grew well, stored well, or could be bought cheaply. In many southern kitchens, a pot of greens was not a wellness statement. It was food. Someone washed the leaves, cut away the tough parts, put them into a pot, and let them cook down with onion, garlic, a little smoked meat, vinegar, pepper sauce, or whatever the household used to make them taste right. The point was not to perform health. The point was to get greens onto the plate in a way people would actually eat. And cooked greens teach us something useful. A vegetable does not have to be raw, perfect, expensive, or photogenic to matter. It can be chopped, cooked down, seasoned, and served beside potatoes, beans, cornbread, eggs, rice, or leftovers. It can be part of a meal that looks ordinary. That may be exactly why it works, because the foods that survive in a household are usually not the foods that require constant motivation. They are the foods that fit. A scoop of powder has to be remembered. A cooked green side can become part of dinner. That difference sounds small, but over years it is enormous. Then there was cabbage. Cabbage is one of those vegetables modern people often underestimate because it does not flatter us. It is sturdy, plain, inexpensive, and not especially interested in looking trendy. But for older households, cabbage was almost perfect. It lasted. It could be shredded raw, cooked into soup, fried in a skillet, tucked beside meat, stretched with potatoes, or salted down into sauerkraut. It could feed a family without demanding much praise. That is the kind of vegetable a kitchen can actually depend on. And this matters for the greens powder conversation, because the modern product often sells variety in the most abstract possible way. Dozens of ingredients, exotic grasses, ancient berries, algae, adaptogens, and a long list that makes the product feel more complete. But a household diet is usually changed by the things that keep coming back. Cabbage came back, soup came back, greens came back. Beans, potatoes, and herbs came back when they were available. It may not look exciting from the outside, but repetition is often what actually changes a diet. Another old answer was the garden, or at least the kitchen door. There is a beautiful old phrase from a wartime garden poster: "Grow vitamins at your kitchen door." I love that line because it sounds almost too perfect for this topic. Before vitamins were something you added to a drink, they were something people were encouraged to grow, pick, cook, and eat. Victory gardens were not about aesthetics, they were practical. Families planted vegetables because food supply mattered. Neighbours grew what they could. Schools, yards, and community plots became part of the food system. Again, the past was not perfect, but the idea was very clear. If you wanted more vegetables, you started close to the kitchen. Now, most of us are not going to plant a victory garden this week. That is fine. The modern version can be much simpler. It might be a bag of frozen spinach, frozen peas, a head of cabbage, canned tomatoes, parsley, herbs, carrots, or anything green that can go into food you already eat. The point is not to recreate the 1940s. The point is to make vegetables less precious again, less like a health project, more like a normal part of the house. That is the old world answer I think is still useful. Not perfection, not a romantic past, just vegetables that are close enough, cheap enough, and easy enough to actually appear in meals. This is also where greens powders can still have a place. If you travel constantly, maybe a powder helps. If you are going through a season where cooking is hard, maybe it is a better backup than nothing. If you genuinely like one, it is third-party tested, and you use it as an addition rather than a replacement, I do not think you need to feel guilty about that. But I would be careful with any product that makes real vegetables feel unnecessary. I would be careful with any label that turns "I struggle to eat vegetables" into "I no longer need to try." And I would be especially careful with claims that sound too grand for a scoop. Words like detox, reset, cleanse, total nutrition, and all-in-one often sound much bigger than the product itself. Your body already has detox systems. Your liver does not need a motivational poster from a green powder company. Your gut does not need every wellness ingredient in one glass. And your meals do not become irrelevant just because a scoop contains spinach powder. So if you are thinking about buying one, I would ask 3 quick questions. What am I hoping this replaces? How much fibre is actually in this? And what could I buy for the same money? A month of greens powder might be $20. It might be $40. It might be $80. Depending on the brand, that same money could buy a lot of cabbage, frozen spinach, peas, carrots, beans, herbs, soup vegetables, or pantry staples. It may not be as glamorous, but it may be more useful. And it is much harder to turn into an Instagram routine. That brings us back to the kitchen. If I were trying to rebuild the old pattern in a modern week, I would not begin with a perfect diet. I would begin with one repeatable thing. Maybe that is one pot of vegetable soup. Not a fancy soup, just something with onions, carrots, cabbage or greens, beans if you like them, broth and enough seasoning that you actually want to eat it again. Maybe it is one cooked green side, frozen spinach with garlic, collards if you grew up with them, cabbage in a skillet, or peas with dinner. Something easy enough to repeat. And maybe it is one green thing that can be added to meals you already eat. Parsley, green onions, frozen peas, pesto, cabbage slaw, or anything that does not turn the meal into a project. This is not about doing a cleanse, starting a challenge, or resetting your life on a Monday morning. It is the opposite. It is making vegetables boring enough to survive your real life. And that may be what the old kitchen understood better than the modern wellness shelf. The goal was never to make greens exciting every morning. The goal was to make them ordinary enough that they kept coming back. A leaf in the soup, cabbage in the pan, greens beside the beans, parsley over the potatoes, a little garden at the door if you were lucky, or a frozen bag in the freezer if you were living in the real world now. That is not the kind of thing that fits on a shiny label, but it is the kind of thing that changes a table. So the next time you see a greens powder promising daily nutrition in one scoop, you do not have to be angry at it. Just look at it with clearer eyes. Ask what it is adding. Ask what it is replacing. And ask whether the thing you really need is a powder or a way to make vegetables show up again without so much effort. Maybe your answer is still the scoop. But it might also be soup, cabbage, cooked greens, a bag of frozen spinach that finally makes it into dinner, or just one green thing that belongs to a meal instead of a performance. That is the part I would like us to remember. Before greens powders, every kitchen did not have perfection. It had a pot, a table, a few ordinary vegetables, and the quiet habit of using them. This week, try that before the scoop. Make one simple vegetable soup. Cook one green side. Add one green thing to a meal you already eat. Not to punish yourself or optimize anything, just to see what happens when vegetables become ordinary again. And I would love to know what that looked like in your family. Was it collards, cabbage, peas, soup greens, parsley on everything? Something from a garden? Something from a freezer? Tell me in the comments. I really do read them, and those old kitchen details often become the beginning of the next episode. And if you come here for honest, old-world household wisdom without the hype, subscribe to Old World Remedies. We will keep looking for the old household habits that still deserve a place in modern life.